God, of what it takes to happen, of what redemption really means for us, and what the ultimate purpose of our redemption in the small sense is to the bigger story that God is unfolding in this world. And I pray as we wrap up this that it's going to be an encouragement to you, especially those of you who need it, as you're awaiting your own redemption story. So let's just jump right in, right off from the beginning, and begin where a realized redemption comes from. A realized redemption comes from, number one, a real Redeemer. In order for you to be redeemed, you need a real Redeemer. And a real Redeemer needs to be both willing and able to redeem you. When we left off last time, we saw that Boaz was a willing Redeemer. He was also able. He had the means and he was willing to redeem Ruth. But there was a twist to the story. Because Boaz knew, because he was very familiar with his family there in Bethlehem, that there was another Redeemer, another relative, who relationally was closer to Naomi and therefore to Ruth than he was. And so by law and by custom, this other Redeemer had first right of refusal to be Ruth's Redeemer. And so this person, though, had to be both willing and able to do the redeeming of her. So we already know that Boaz himself, again, was willing and able. But it's up to him now, knowing that Ruth needs to be redeemed, wants to be redeemed, to make sure that he's not overstepping his bounds and overstepping the custom and jumping in where someone else had right to be her Redeemer. This is what we see happening at the beginning of the chapter. So go to verse 1. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And this man turned and sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." And so they sat down. And then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech." Now, Elimelech, again, is Naomi's dead husband. Verse 4, "So I thought I would tell you of it and say, Abide in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, but if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." I'm next in line. And he said, this so-called Redeemer said, "I will redeem it." So here's Boaz. He set off to make clear that he's clear to marry Ruth. He wants to do so. He's willing. He's able. But he needs to know he has a free pathway to do that. There's this other Redeemer out there. And this guy, again, is relationally closer to Naomi as a relative than Boaz is. And if so, he's going to be first in line to marry her. Now, this little custom that they're working through, that Boaz is needing to work through, is based on a couple of passages, a couple of laws or customs that are found in the Old Testament. One is found in the book of Leviticus. The other is found in the book of Deuteronomy. The one in Leviticus is found in the 25th verse of Leviticus chapter 25. And it goes like this. "If your brother becomes poor and sells part of his property, then his nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what his brother has sold." Now, this is a little odd for us because we're not Old Testament Jews. But let me just see if we can do a little bit of a survey here. I want you to raise your hand if you personally own property today that was once owned by your grandparents or your great-grandparents or great-grandparents. Why don't you just raise your hand? Raise it high, wave, so I can see. Do you see how few people in the room? See, just a handful of you. But how few of us own property that was owned by our grandparents or great-grandparents. Because I don't know what it is, maybe it's in this culture, we do not have the same kind of affinity to the land that has been a part of our families as the Israelites. But if you were an Israelite, if you were a Jew in those days, to own family property was a very big deal. It carried a huge responsibility. And you did whatever you could to hold on to that land and to keep it a part of the family. And so if a family member, for one reason or another, was forced to sell that property, it was upon the closest relative who had the means to come along and to buy that property to keep it within the tribe, within the family. Now, there was another passage of Scripture that is coming into play with the story of Boaz and Ruth, and that there was this provision for providing for a future for the name of a family if a son dies without having a male child to carry on the family name. And this provision, this plan, is found in the Deuteronomy passage, chapter 25. Look with me in verses 5 and 6. This is what it says. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside of the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her, that is, have kids with her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that is, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. So both of these concerns are at play in Ruth's story. One is the redeeming of the land. Naomi had some land that she had now possessed that belonged to her dead husband Elimelech, and a relative needed to come along and to purchase it, to redeem it, to buy it, to keep it in the family. But also, since she had a couple of children, Chilion and Mahlon, and both of them have died, and Mahlon, neither one of them, including Mahlon, the dead husband of Ruth, did not produce any children. They were not able to continue the name of Elimelech, and therefore Mahlon in the land, and therefore a relative was needed to come along and to keep Mahlon's name alive, married his widow Ruth, and began to produce children who would carry on the family name. So this is all that is going on here, and why Boaz is concerned that he not infringe upon the customs of the day. He himself wants to redeem Naomi's land and marry Ruth. But he knows that another relative is in line to do this. He gets first dibs to be the redeemer, and that's why he's asking the question of the man that could potentially be the redeemer. He just needs to make sure that he's actually able and willing to do so. So he goes and he sits by the city gate, waits for him to come by, and when this so-called redeemer comes by the gate, Boaz says to him, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." Now, before I get past this little statement, this little invitation, there's something actually going on here that I think is significant. When he says to him, "Turn aside, friend," that word friend is actually a Hebrew idiom that means something like so-and-so. You know, he's like, "Turn aside, so-and-so, and sit down." This is the kind of name, you would use when you see somebody coming your way and you're like, "I think I know this guy's name, but I'm not quite sure." And before you can figure out and remember what the name is, they come up and they speak to you, and you're like, "Hey, bud," right? "Hey, pal, hey, buddy, how you doing, my friend?" Well, this is what Boaz is effectively using, the type of name that he's using here. He's like, "Hey, bud, have a seat. Hey, partner, sit down with me. Hey, buddy, why don't you take a rest here?" But now listen, Boaz actually knows this guy's name. He knows there is a relative that is closer in line than he is to being the Redeemer. So of course he knows his name, but instead he basically refers to him as Mr. So-and-so. And this is really important because it's a signal that we're really not going to remember this guy. He ends up being a forgettable person. He has a chance, by the way, to be immortalized in Scripture, right? We know that the ultimate Redeemer here in this story is going to be Boaz. We know his name. His name is recorded for all of time in Holy Scripture. But this other guy, it could have been his name instead of Boaz. But he is forgettable. He is just Mr. So-and-so. And so Mr. So-and-so sits down, and that's when Boaz, he gathers 10 of the elders of the city to sit down with him. They're going to sort of serve as witnesses about what is about to proceed here. This is an official gathering. And they're going to bear witness, and whatever is agreed upon in this moment is basically going to be the agreed upon legal action. So Boaz then gets down to business with this fellow. He tells Mr. So-and-so about Naomi, about how she's been away, she's returned from Moab, and she's got some family land that belonged to her husband Elimelech that she needs to sell, and she's looking for a kinsman that she can sell it to in order to keep it in the family. So Boaz is saying, "Look, you're the Redeemer. You're the Goel, the kinsman Redeemer. If you're able to redeem it, do so. If that's what you want, go for it. If not, I'm going to do it. You just let me know. I'm the next in line." And so Mr. So-and-so is probably sitting there thinking this through and what this means for him, what it means for his family. He knows Naomi. She's an older woman. She's past childbearing age, so he doesn't really have to marry her. What it means is he would just sort of take care of her. He'd sell the property. He would agree to take care of her in her old age. It won't cost him much. And then he can have the land for this fair price, keeping it in the family. And not only that, he's going to be able to pass Elimelech's land on to one of his sons that are already alive. And so he says, you're twisting my arm here, but I'll do it. I'll redeem the land. I'll take responsibility for Naomi. And so like Boaz, Mr. So-and-so is able to be a redeemer. He has the means. He can buy it. He has the right. He can support Naomi. So he says yes. Now we don't know if Ruth and Naomi were standing around watching all of this at this moment. The Bible doesn't say. We can only speculate. We do know that Bethlehem is not a large town. It's not as large as Jerusalem. It's a fairly small community. It's quite likely that Ruth and Naomi were very interested at what was going to happen. And so they probably had their ears up. They'd probably be reading close by, paying attention. And so we can only well imagine if they're observing this, when they hear Boaz say to this guy, hey, you're closer than me. If you want to redeem her, go for it. Can you imagine what's going through Ruth's mind, what's going through her thoughts? I mean, she's already given her heart to Boaz. She's already said, yes, please marry me. Just ask me. I want to be redeemed by you. And now Boaz, she hears him perhaps saying to another guy, hey, you get first dibs if you want it. And Ruth is probably thinking along with Boaz, or with Naomi, Boaz, what are you thinking here? I thought we had an understanding here. Don't you remember? I came in to you while you were sleeping. I uncovered your feet. I sat there waiting so that you would see that I was asking for a proposal. Where you go, I'll go and all that. You're my ride and die. What's going on here, right? Well, Boaz knew what he was doing here because he knows the full story. He knows what this other guy is going to have to wrestle with. He's like, okay, before you really commit to this, you need to know one more thing before you say yes. You're able to redeem it, but are you willing? Let's see after you hear what I have to say. Look at verse 5. Boaz said,